Hello, and welcome to Red Aggro Masterclass 4. And today's episode, we're going to do a deep dive on gameplay. And we're going to watch a couple matches that I recorded completely randomly. They're not specially curated matches. And I'm going to go really in depth as to why I made pretty much every decision that I made. And by the way, there are going to be chapters in this video. It's going to be kind of a longer introduction, and so if you want to skip right to the part where I show gameplay and tell you why I do what I do, and then you can use the chapters and skip to that. Um, but I really want to start by saying thank you to all of you. This video is really dedicated to basically anyone who's watching. This is um, really a thank you letter to all of you. It has been a long year filled with ups and downs, both, in Magic, out of Magic, within tournaments, outside of tournaments. But, in the Magic world, the support from all of you, if you, no matter where you follow me or where you subscribe or, how you interact with me, I I really appreciate more than you'll ever know. It's been an amazing year to meet many of you, interact with all of you, and so I wanted to do a really nice piece of content to finish the year, and I think deep gameplay analysis is something that can go a long way because we can gain a lot of information from just two matches with two different decks against two different decks, and it's something that surveying some of you that you guys really want to see, and so yeah, I just want to start by saying thank you. This is for all of you, and um, so with that, I do want to say like some things that this video isn't. This video is not an advertisement. It's not, streamer says broken deck is broken, break the meta. This is not me saying you should play the decks that I play in this video. This isn't me saying, go buy my sideboard guide for these decks and you'll spike your RCQ with it. These are the two decks that I'm playing this season, but I am going to, you know, talk about the concepts in a way that no matter what aggro deck you're playing, you will get value from this. And while there will be, things specific to those decks, I'm largely going to be talking about, at a higher level as well. And, I think I had some other introductory things that I wanted to say, but now they're kind of escaping me. So, what's going to happen? There's two matches here. The first one, I'm playing Izzet Leyline, and that deck list will be in the description. Sorry, and I don't want to do an analysis on that deck. That's not what this video is. And the second match, I'm playing Boros Mice. And again, neither match is this like curated, beautiful piece of art of a match. It's not this like perfect match where it's like, this is why this deck is amazing, or this is why I'm amazing at playing the game. I think Magic can be a beautiful game, and there's a lot of matches where afterwards you're like, whoa, that was so cool. Like, I was Einstein, this happened, that happened, it was amazing. Um, but there's this huge subset of matches that are very ugly. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways, winning ugly matches is is almost harder. They challenge you not just to like make good plays, but they challenge you to stay stable mentally. We'll see some like battling with tilt in at least one of these matches. And so these are definitely on the uglier side. I won't spoil how either match ends. I'll just tell you, I just kind of hit record on a random match, and by the end, I was like, yeah, I made enough interesting decisions here that I think it's worth talking about. And so, yeah, let's get into it. That's enough. If anything else, big picture comes up, I'll just pause and talk about it. So, as I said, first match, I'm playing Leyline. It's Izzet Leyline, but it's Leyline. We understand that Leyline is a very explosive deck, and it's kind of fluid in, is it an aggro deck or is it a combo deck? And there's a lot of things that drive whether I'm playing it as an aggro deck or a combo deck. I think, more often in the current meta and with the current card pool, we're probably trying to win as a combo deck, but it is still, you know, red aggro, red cards. We're trying to get our opponent dead. And so I'm going to pause frequently as we look through this. And this first hand looks pretty good. I have 3 lands. I have a slick shot. I have a protection spell. I have a Riddler to reload, and I have my Sellsword. So if I'm looking at this from an aggro deck perspective, I don't have my Hired Claw or any kind of 1-drop, so I'm not going to go 1, 2, 3, kill my opponent. But from a combo deck perspective, I'm basically just missing a bolt. I have 8 instants in my deck that say target creature gets 3 extra power. And so if I can find one of those, my opponent's probably going to die. And looking at this hand, I get to, plot on turn 2. And then I get to use Riddler to draw into some more gas. If I find a full bore, then I get to haste out my Riddler. So this hand, it's not the nuts. I don't have a Leyline, notably. But in the blind, this is a hand that I'm happy to keep. And, thinking back, and I don't always play perfect, I think it would be really, really smart to start with Starting Town. I'm not going to use my mana anyway, and so Starting Town means my opponent has literally no idea what deck I'm playing. Now, Izzet Leyline is not a meta deck, and so, Spire Bluff Canal, I guess, has upsides in that maybe I'm getting my opponent to think I'm playing a deck that I'm not, whereas Starting Town, they're not going to think anything. But just a microscopic thing to think about. If this was an Inspiring Vantage or a different fast land, maybe playing Starting Town on turn 1 denies my opponent information for an extra turn, which in a lot of spots doesn't mean anything, but in some spots is pretty important. So my opponent plays Lush Portico. I just kind of shrug, and I know that I'm going to end up simply plotting my slick shot. And now my opponent goes land pass. And what I want to do throughout this video is I want to encourage you to pause as well. And I want to encourage you to pause and think about, what would I do in this situation? And so before I do anything else, I want you to pause the video and ask yourself, what would I do? How would I spend my mana this turn? Okay, so you unpaused. Let's see what I did. So the nice thing about this video is you can kind of see the pauses where I'm thinking. I'm not playing very fast this turn. Until you can see I kind of end up deciding what to do. And why do you think, without me saying anything else, maybe pause for a second and think, why did I do that? Was that a good play? Okay, unpause. At face value, that was insane. I literally unplotted my slick shot to deal one whole damage and put a counter on Hired Claw. This is like the least amount of value anyone has ever gotten from taking a slick shot off plot, maybe ever. It looks horrible. Why would I do that? Well, my opponent played this station land, which signifies to me that they're playing some kind of Kona deck, which means it is a low interaction combo deck. And when we're playing against a low interaction combo deck, and right now Kona is part of the meta. They play a little bit of interaction, but not too much. It recently won a showcase. It's not a big part of the meta, but it did win a big event recently and is a deck that matters. Another, the biggest combo deck in Standard right now is Reanimator. And Reanimator is more like a medium interaction combo deck. They are playing Awaken the Undead and Bitter Triumph. So that changes the equation a little bit. But against a low interaction combo deck, and to an extent, something like Reanimator, once they signify to us, like once we figure out that's what we're playing against, in game one, you gotta drop everything and you gotta go. You gotta figure out, how can I deal the most damage possible out of the cards I have as quickly as possible. And you really have to play it as though they're going to have no interaction, because if you dance around respecting them, like respecting that they might interact with you, what you're doing is you're giving them time to do their combo. And if they combo first, then you're probably not going to win the game. So here against Kona, it's like low interaction and a combo deck. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to like play my cards. And here, there's really nothing else I could do that deals damage. And so I just play my slick shot, get my one free damage, and put a counter on Hired Claw because it's one more damage next turn. Even against something like Reanimator, as I said, they play a reasonable amount of interaction. But if you just play around their interaction and slow play, then you're just gonna lose the game to their combo before you can combo off. Because right now, as we talked about, I'm one combo piece short. I don't have a bolt, and so it might be different. No, not it might. It would definitely be different if I had a turn 4 kill. Like, if this Quantum Riddler was a full bore, and I knew that next turn I could go slick shot, full bore, protect it with shore up, or cast shore up proactively, and then fling it with sellsword and just kill my opponent, that would be totally different. But here, since I don't have a clean sight on lethal, I have to just say, okay, this is going to be an ugly game. Like, if they have it, they have it. It's game one. I don't really have meaningful interaction. And so that's why I take this exceedingly bizarre line to try and squeeze out as much damage as possible without caring about how pretty it looks. Now, I check what land is in my opponent's graveyard. They play Alanamar Elves, and they just pass. And obviously I'm going to play my land. Feel free to pause again. What would you do? Unpause. Let's see what I do. Dodging the Arena Auto Tapper Punish. We draw a card first. Then I have two sellswords. So I just fling this Riddler. The game is not going on long enough that I'm going to hard cast this Riddler. Spending 5 mana on Riddler is not going to win the game. I didn't find a full bore, and so flinging Riddler for 4 deals not only that 4 damage, but also gets me up to 3 damage in the air. Opponent decides to block. Now, what do we think opponent blocking told us? They have their 4th land. That's for sure. The other thing that I do here, now, in this case, obviously casting Shore Up to deal 3 extra damage and put my opponent at 8 doesn't really make sense, right? But even if I had a Bolt, like, no matter what in this spot, I hold on to Shore Up here because I know that Kona likes to cheat in the Saga creature that has ETB to destroy a non-land permanent or something like that. My opponent, spoiler alert, my prediction was correct and my opponent's gonna play that card. This is where I wish that, this is where streaming is nice versus a recorded video, because during a stream I would have kind of called it out before my opponent did it. In this case, you just have to believe me that, I held up the Shore Up for precisely that purpose. I guess we'll just refresh this. Okay, so we can see that that's exactly what happened. Opponent plays Kona, then they play Summon Bahamut, and I can use Shore Up here to blow out the removal spell. Now, Bahamut does fly, but I still, having more attackers than my opponent has blockers is very important in this spot. It's a really good time to kind of talk about how important it is to be unselfish when you're playing Magic. Because while I kind of said earlier, like, forget everything and just be like one-track mind, deal as much damage as you can, you do still want to spend a little bit of mental energy thinking about what your opponent might do. Even, you should always be spending energy on this, but even in scenarios where you're like almost ignoring them, you should think a little bit. Because here's like a very clear case where it's pretty... If you think about the Kona deck, if you know the Kona deck, I saw this coming a mile away, and no matter what cards I had, I would have kept that Shore Up. So you do want to think about key turns, key mana points. And here this delay is me thinking, do I play Slickshot first, or do I kind of cast Enigma first and see if I can high roll something? But I find my 3rd Sellsword. But that happens to be precisely enough. We're going to deal 5 in combat. And that 3rd Sellsword... the 3rd Sellsword doesn't matter. I just had lethal face up with Sellsword and Slickshot. But this was kind of a cool game where, notably, my opponent went to exactly 0. So that really ugly turn where I took my Slickshot off plot to deal 1 damage and to put 1 counter on Hired Claw. Well, my opponent, they went to exactly 0. It's very easy to lose against combo decks where, like, well, I got them to 2 and then they did the thing. So this was a case where as soon as my opponent played the station land, I went, oh, combo deck. I'm not doing the finesse thing. I'm not waiting till I can 1 turn kill with Slickshot. Like, I'm just gonna deal damage, and I'm gonna try to kill them before they kill me. And if their hand is not the nuts, then I have a chance. And Summon Bahamut is not the nuts. I had the protection spell, and Bahamut obviously doesn't end the game. And so we're able to just attack into him face first and deal precisely enough damage to kill my opponent. Um, the goal of the game is to reduce your opponent's life total to exactly 0. Any damage more than that doesn't matter. And any damage less than that doesn't matter. If you put your opponent to 1, or if they're at 19 when you die, doesn't matter. You still lost. If you put your opponent to 0, or at negative 25, doesn't matter. You still won. So this was a cool game where a really funny looking early turn ended up being the difference between winning and losing, most likely. Now, what would my opponent have played on the next turn? Like, would I have been guaranteed to lose? Probably not, especially since I have another sellsword. Um, but being less aggressive in that game puts me in a significant disadvantage. My opponent's going to put another thing into play for free with Kona. I forget what else Bahamut does, but um, it's I'm pretty feel pretty comfortable saying that that very weird turn won us that game because it put 2 extra damage on our opponent, and we were able to put them at exactly 0. Let's check out game 2. On the draw, we've got that horrible hand, and I promised to talk about everything, so there's really nothing to talk about, though. You can see all the blue, 1 mountain. This is not a keep. Yeah, it has a Leyline, that's great, but it's clearly not a keep. This is rough. It's a 6. We get to go Hired Claw, Emberheart Challenger, reload with Riddler, which in a more fair matchup I would be pretty excited about. Playing against a combo deck, I'm not excited about this. If it's a 7, I throw it back. But as a 6, I feel like I have to keep it. And so we're going to go through that curve. It's unlikely anything's going to change our mind. And then the Seam Rip for the Hired Claw. So, pretty rough start. And we draw 2 lands. So, really nothing interesting in these early turns. I've no decisions to make. But I'll have a decision next turn. We have several decisions to make here. Feel free to pause. Ask yourself what you would do. Unpause. Alright. So I don't play my Riddler. And I play my tap land. What's up with that? Pause. Unpause. There's one really, really critical thing here. It's about to be turn 4 for my opponent. I really want to hold up this into the flood ball. Now, could I have played Quantum Riddler? No, because I only have 1 untapped blue source. So if I play Riddler without really thinking, like, I draw Flood Maw and I'm like, okay, this doesn't deal damage. Let me just play Riddler, draw a card, and see, what else I want to do. Then I would have put myself in a spot where I can't bounce their Kona, and they're going to have a guy coming in right now. So really the only play here is tap land pass, because we need to hold up the Flood Maw. Really, really important to understand the important turns when you're playing against combo decks. And then my opponent does that. Do you think I'm gonna cast the Flood Maw? Pause. Unpause. I thought about it. It's fun to see in these videos where you can see me thinking, why didn't I cast the Flood Maw, by the way? Think about it as we see what I draw off this Riddler. Another land. So at one point I talked about kind of dealing with tilt. Like, obviously this game is disgusting. I mulled a 6, so we have a completely unplayable 7. I mulled a 6, and I've drawn land, Flood Maw, land. What's up with that, man? That's brutal. But we just keep making the best plays we can. And the reason that I saved Flood Maw is for precisely this. If they block, now I get to maw one insect, and Emberheart just eats the other insect. Great example of, I held my mana because I wanted to cast Flood Maw on my opponent's turn. And then my opponent did something unexpected. And so I could have mentally just been like, oh, I already committed to casting Flood Maw this turn. I didn't spend my mana, blah, blah, blah. Like, I could have just cast it. But instead, I thought for a moment, and I said, okay, actually, this Prowess trigger is really valuable. Because when I attack with Challenger, whether they single block or double block, Flood Maw kills one insect, and Challenger will be a 3/3, and it will simply eat the other insect. A really important spot where my opponent did something I wasn't expecting them to do. And so I stopped, and instead of kind of just being committed or locked in on a line I had already decided on, I reevaluated and said, well, hold on a second. It's actually better for me to do nothing, which is pretty rare. But it was better for me to do nothing in that spot and wait. Now, you could argue I should have done nothing even longer and continued to hold Flood Maw for when Kona comes down, but you gotta kill your opponent. My opponent was at 16. Bouncing Kona for one turn is just not gonna win the game when I'm that far away from victory. So here they put Starcage into play, and there's nothing to do here but put the big guy in play. And Riddler's not embarrassing here. My opponent just put Starcage into play with Kona. That's not that great. Now it's scary because I have this thing and they get to go fetch something. And they fetch Valgavoth, which is terrifying. But let's see what kind of big turn we can put together. We're gonna draw some cards. We're gonna attack with Riddler. Something like full bore plus. Oh yeah, they just get to put it right into play. What am I talking about? Yikes. And so here I'm tanking a little bit, trying to decide. I think I'm thinking about conceding, to be honest. But there's quite a bit of match left. Somehow we play some magic here. So I could have just cast Riddler instead of warping him here, of course. But I'm in really, really bad shape. And if I just play Riddler, my opponent can attack. 2 Riddlers doesn't kill Valgavoth. Things are not good. I cannot win the game if I take a passive approach. So I'm hoping to rip something awesome. And I do draw full bore, which would be especially cool if I had some way to make it a little better. Like, well, with a Valgavoth in play, it's hard to think of anything, but this is a brutal one. But we're not quite in concession range yet. We do have ways to deal a lot of damage. And we've drawn so many lands that there's not that many left in the deck. We should be drawing gas here. Our opponent does decide to attack, which is a good thing for us. Valgavoth's not blocking. That's what we want to see. Opponent being at 25 is brutal, and they put Yun into play. And now, I'm a little surprised I didn't just scoop, to be honest. But I think they didn't have anything to recur in the graveyard. Was the reason that I didn't scoop. But at this point, I think we're heavily in scoop range. Now the Overlord comes untapped. We finally found some good cards. But it's just too little too late. I'm going to actually skip forward. I did decide to, cast Riddler, draw 2 cards, draw 3 cards, right. Nick getting in there. Hey, Nick. So, yeah, I think what's kind of cool is that actually there's some decent damage here if we had, found our cards in the right order. But that's neither here nor there. We do lose game 2. We're going to go to game 3. I think the spot where we cast the Flood Maw, well, where we didn't cast it and then we cast it, that's really the important lesson from this game. The rest of it was me just being on the draw and drawing lands, and sometimes that's going to happen. We were kind of mostly out of it, but we had some backdoor lines. Anyway, Valgavoth is also the nuts, so let's go look at game 3, see what we can learn from that. As I said, I didn't curate these matches. It's not meant to make my deck look good. It's not meant to make me look good. It's just to talk about Magic. And I think, ugly matches are worthy of analysis. I think, learning how to win ugly, and on the other side of that coin, understanding that everyone loses ugly is important. No matter how good a player is, sometimes they just have matches or games where it's well, guess I'll just die. So yeah. This is not the greatest hand in the world, but it's double Leyline. We got Turn Inside Out. We've got Challenger. And the cool thing about Leyline with Riddler, in addition to, full board shenanigans and all kinds of other stuff, is that if you're putting Leylines into play, then they're not in your hand. So you get closer to drawing 2 with Riddler by starting the game with less cards in hand, which is pretty cool. So anyway, we're on the play. Low interaction combo deck means Challenger's gonna live. So we just, go land Challenger and see what happens. Now, they did show us a Seam Rip last game. I need to fade Seam Rip here. And luckily we fade Seam Rip here. And can we draw a card with text on it is the question. And if not, what do we do? Feel free to pause. Unpause. First things first. Our opponent just put a Star Cage in their hand. So we better not play this Hired Claw. And the question is, are we casting Turn Inside Out? We're casting Turn Inside Out. Now, I could brick on my exile. In fact, I probably will. But we still cast it here. This is so much damage. Dealing 12 and knowing that our opponent is going to cast Arcage next turn. The other thing is that the card goes into exile, not your hand. So notably, as I said, since we put two Leylines into play, if I exiled just a total nothing burger, I could play Starting Town and Quantum Riddler and draw two cards. And I'm all the more set up to kill my opponent after they tap out for Starcage. Um, but even better, we draw Enter the Enigma, so we get to draw three cards, which is very exciting. So we were rewarded for our somewhat risky line. Again, even if we brick, we are fine with, dealing 12 and drawing cards before our opponent gets to so here an interesting thing happens. I play the Hired Claw. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I didn't notice the Starcage in their hand. I'm gonna say it was a misplay. The reason I'm gonna say it was a misplay is because I think playing Stadium Headliner would have actually been okay. Because I really do want to force my opponent to tap out. I want to force them to spend 3 mana so that I can, hopefully just kill them with Slick Shot. Hard Claw is definitely better than Headliner, so I'm not totally sure if that's what I was thinking. I think in hindsight, I would definitely play Headliner here because I really want my opponent to spend all 3 mana on Starcage. And it also means they have to have an untapped land, which this deck does not have unlimited untapped lands. Alas, they play their untapped land. They eat up my board. And we draw a tap land. And we play our guy. And I think I'm deciding here between plot and cast. And ultimately, plotting looks a little better here. Obviously I've seen Starcage. If they untap and play another Starcage, then I'm pretty embarrassed that I dealt 1 damage with my Slick Shot. But they could also play Kona into the Summon Bahamut again, which we saw earlier. They don't do either of those things though, but it's important to play around those kinds of things. Doing the 1 extra damage wasn't gonna end the game. Cool turn to think about what you would do. Let's see what I did. We start by drawing 2 cards. Typically, if you know you're going to draw cards, do that first. Here, Riddler doesn't trigger prowess. There's no reason to put Slickshot into play unless well, there's just no reason. If Riddler triggered prowess, I would play Slickshot first, but obviously Riddler doesn't trigger prowess. And we just draw 2 more creatures. And what do you do? Now it's get ugly time. I could have dealt 1 extra damage by casting Slickshot last turn, but I knew I was going to be drawing cards this turn, and it made more sense because, oh, come on, Stanley. And interesting decision. They decide to take an extra damage. so that Fenrir lives. And here, next turn we'll be able to attack with Slick Shot and with Restless Spire. Restless Spire only costs 2 mana to activate, so we can put both into play. But, well, let's see what... He didn't have a way to tap his Kona. So we just play Slick Shot. And we, once again, just barely squeak out lethal. The shore up doesn't matter. He can block the 2 creatures on the ground, but he can't block Slick Shot. I think one of the more interesting decisions in this game was, back when I applauded the Slick Shot. And I do still agree with that decision. Doing the 1 extra damage. Let's see. So my opponent was at 6. Here, dealing 1 just feels bad when I know that I'll be able to go 1, 2, 3, and then... So all these 3 cards are coming out of my hand, which means next turn I'm going to draw 3 cards. Because no matter what, I can play Starting Town and then Warp Riddler. And I'll have 4 mana. And so it really felt like there was a very good chance that I could deal more than 1 damage with my Slick Shot. Conversely, if I run Slick Shot out with Stadium Headliner, if my opponent has another Star Cage, Slick Shot dies. As we saw in Game 1, if my opponent has Kona into Summon Bahamut, Slick Shot dies. Now, in this case, they didn't have the station land, but we do know that they are playing Star Cages post-board. So I think with how many cards I was going to draw, and again, thinking about, combo decks in general, not just precisely this one. Dealing 1 here, especially post-board, it's a little bit of a different ball game than Game 1. You really are just like, gotta deal damage. Post-board, there's more tactics on both sides. And obviously, plotting Slick Shot didn't pay off. I could have dealt 1 extra damage, but we did still, once again, manage to put our opponent to exactly 0, being as precise as we could. Now, actually, I take it back. I could have played Leyline, triggering Prowess on Slick Shot, and dealt 3 damage in the air. So we could have put them to -1. I did decide just to play the second Slick Shot, but playing the third Leyline would have done just as well. So that is our match with Leyline. Next up, we're going to look at Boros Mice. Again, I'm not going to do like a big deck tech. That's not what this video is, but Boros Mice is, not all that different than Gruul Mice or even, Mono Red. It's playing threats, it's playing interaction, and we're trying to kill our opponent before they kill us. So, quick note, Firebrain Scheme, it's Heroes Hangout in paper. You choose one mode. One mode is basically a red sleight of hand. You look at the top 2 cards. You exile one of them. So instead of drawing it instead of putting it into your hand like sleight of hand, you exile it. But you can cast it until the end of your next turn. And then the more exciting thing, it has very, very high damage potential with these Flowerfoot soldiers because you can give 1 or 2 target creatures +1/+0 and first strike. So if you hit 2 Flowerfoots, including an off-sprung Flowerfoot, just the Flowerfoots alone, it goes from 2 1-power creatures to 8 power with first strike. And if you have other mice, then they all get the benefit too. So this is a great hand. And our opponent plays Llanowar Elves. So suddenly, this hand doesn't look very good. I'm on the draw, and I don't have interaction. My opponent played an elf on turn 1. So this is still a snap keep because it's so good that no matter what, I'm keeping it. Like, it's on the draw, it's slightly less good because it's all proactive. But my goodness, Flowerfoot into Manifold is our favorite thing to do. We have an extra Flowerfoot, we have Firebrain Scheme, and we have the Valley Flame Caller to, it's a lord for mice and lizards, so all our dudes are going to deal 1 extra damage when she comes into play. It's just a perfect curve out, except our opponent played an elf, so they're going to curve out even better, more than likely. But, gotta do what you gotta do. And here comes the Badger Mole. And here comes another 2-drop. And it's Deep Cavern Bat. Now, we were very lucky to draw the second Manifold Mouse. If our opponent took our only Manifold Mouse, it would be really crushing. In this case, the second Manifold is really, really good. So now we get to still play Manifold Mouse and attack for 4. Our opponent obviously has a much scarier board than us, but we get to present a clock, which is something that they're not doing yet. And notably, I played the land my opponent already knew about, even though it cost me 2 life to do it, instead of playing the land I top decked. There's a universe where eventually maybe I play Sacred Foundry for free, and I just play it tapped if I draw lands on multiple turns in a row. But my opponent knows about the Valley Flame Caller. As far as they know, I only have 2 lands. I don't want to tell my opponent that I have 3 lands already for my Flame Caller, and I don't want to take the only unknown information I have and make it known. So whenever I have face-up information from something like a Deep Cavern Bat, if it's a reasonable play, I want to play my known cards before I start digging into my own unknown cards. So, clock is on. We hit for 4, and we hope that our opponent doesn't play Ouroboros. The second Badger Mole Cub is so crazy. This is a spot where I start to think about conceding. But then my opponent plays out their whole hand. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. It's just a whole bunch of little dudes. That's not scary at all. And so, at every point, this game looked kind of very scary. Our opponent went turn 1 elf, turn 2 Badger Mole Cold, another Badger Mole Cut. But then it's like, oh, all right, well, it's really good that I didn't kind of get into my own head and scoop too early or do anything weird like that. So another land decision. A lot of times it's kind of nice to hide your rock face. I don't really want to tell my opponent that all my creatures can't have haste until I'm probably giving 1 haste. So, for example, once this rock face is in play, then my opponent knows that I can give the Flowerfoot in my hand haste. And so they know that I have 1 more attacker than is face up. In any case, our opponent simply chump blocks, And that was an attack for 6 because of Valley Flamecaller's replacement effect to deal extra damage. And now I'll pause. And this is a cool spot for you to pause and think about how we can deal the most damage this turn. Let's unpause. And it's time to utilize that hidden rock face village. We are not going to Offspring because we're going to give that guy haste and buff our whole team. And then we're going to use Firebrain Scheme. And then we're going to use Firebrain Scheme. So we buff. This is an interesting one because I don't want to lose bodies in combat. And so I buff these big guys before I then give double strike to Flowerfoot to trigger Valiant another time. And this ensures that I don't lose Flamecaller or Manifold Mouse in combat. The first strike especially helpful with Manifold Mouse. And so our opponent is going to trade off and eat Flowerfoot, but they take 10 damage. Extra damage from the Flamecaller. So they take a whopping 10 damage. They're at 6. We eat a land. We eat that. As long as our opponent doesn't play Ouroboros here, we... So I couldn't stop myself. I had to give the nice. We're in a commanding position. We've drawn 3 lands in a row, and our opponent just goes, Ouroboros. So, now, granted, we did have a really good draw when we found the second Manifold Mouse. But since then, we've drawn all lands, and our opponent top-decked Ouroboros for exactly lethal. 1 extra, but, come on, man. So that's the stuff of nightmares when you're like, all right, I clawed through. This game is locked up. All I have to do is fade the best draw in their deck off the top. And yeah, they drew the best card off the top. You could argue that I should have left back some number of blockers. But by attacking with everything, I do threaten lethal. And so if I don't attack with everything, I'm not threatening lethal, and they can just not block at all. So if I don't attack, they still just get to play Ouroboros and attack into my tiny board. And yeah, you gotta play to win. If I sit around waiting for them to draw Ouroboros, which is what not attacking would do, then that just extends the game and helps me, have more chances to die to Ouroboros. We put a strong clock on our opponent, and they top-decked their out. So we lost. Not really going to talk about sideboarding much. That's not what this video is. Alright, so going into game 2, I had it locked up. My opponent top-decked Ouroboros. So, I'm not happy. And we have an unplayable hand. Sleight of hand helps you find lands, but it is not a land. So we gotta throw it back. And we go from 1 land to 0. So, after drawing 3 lands in a row, after our opponent top decking their out, we're going to 5. Not happy. Not happy at all. Now, we're on the play. I do, because I'm a little tilted, I misplay. I should have played Bivouac, not Foundry. In my, one, I was annoyed. I was annoyed. But two, I just kind of, my brain got locked on, I want to play Foundry so that the Verge is online. Who cares? I can shock in Foundry. I can't shock in Bivouac. So 100%, you know, if you're playing a tap land, unless the, Verge mana matters right now, you should play the one that always enters tapped. You want to retain the ability to bring your land in untapped if possible. So we draw Swordmaster, which is a very mediocre draw, and we draw a land, which the fourth land is really not where we want to be. I'm on a 5. I end up deciding, and I didn't do the pause thing here, but basically I decided, 1, I don't think my opponent's going to block, and 2, the only way I'm winning this game is if I get lucky, and I think that involves me just pushing damage. I have to somehow push through 20 damage, and so I decided just playing Seam Rip was not a good enough turn. And what's great is, my opponent didn't have Ouroboros. They weren't able to take advantage of the Badger Mole mana. And so that is the exact kind of getting lucky that you need when you're on a 5 in order to steal games. You hear good players say all the time, you need to put yourself in a position to get lucky. If I had spent my mana on Seam Rip and not put Valley Flamecaller in play, then I lose a bunch of tempo. I took a risk by spending all 3 mana on Flamecaller and hoping my opponent doesn't put Ouroboros in play. And because they didn't, now on this turn, I get to have a great turn. Once again, I'm not offspringing Swordmaster because I want to give him haste instead. And we get to make a very respectable attack. Shoot the Sheriff does come down. Notably, Valley Flamecaller is not a legal target for Shoot the Sheriff, which is an upside for playing Valley Flamecaller. He is an outlaw. So here this is an attack for 7. Flamecaller hits for 4, Swordmaster for 3, because that Valiant trigger still happened. So now we're not in the worst spot. Deep Cavern Bet? Sorry, bud. Joke's on you. I mulled the 5. Hand is empty. And, of course, I draw a land. Notably, we go to combat before we play the land. My opponent doesn't need to know that my last card is a land when they're deciding whether or not to block here. They don't need to know. Just attack first. Let them make their decision. Then show them that our hand is still empty. Our opponent concedes. And somehow we win. I made one really, really tiny misplay when I played Foundry instead of Bivouac. But otherwise, despite really frustrating circumstances, I just tried my best to I'll play my cards. I'll play to my outs. And put myself in a position to win. And I just needed that one little window. I had to let Badger Mole Cub live for one turn. And Badger Mole Cub didn't kill me, so I was able to kill my opponent. shout out Restless Bivouac. It was important in that mulligan that I kept the Bivouac. And to kind of talk a little bit more about that before we get too far away from it. In that mulligan decision, and of course, by the way, it's 1 land, 0 land, and then 5 lands, right? We love. Magic is a wonderful game. So, the thing about this keep, what's really important is, you might look at Sun Below, Sacred Foundry and go, oh, sick. Like, perfect mana. I go, but I'm not casting Seam Rip on turn 1. I know for a fact I'm playing a tap land on turn 1. So keeping Bivouac is just free. Like, I'm 100% going to play a tap land. Just keep Bivouac because you never know. And Bivouac there ends up, dealing really good damage. Bivouac is an underrated creature land. It triggers Valiant. The creature gets to keep the counter. And so because I know I'm not taking a game action on turn 1, it is 100% free to keep the Bivouac and play it on turn 1. Then I know that I can play Sunbillow Verge on turn 2. I can put Foundry tapped on turn 2. But I can shock Foundry, so I don't have to miss any tempo or land drops by keeping the Bivouac. Oh, my throat hurts. I'm not a big talker, so these long dictated videos. I got really scared that I maybe kept that hand with the way that the timing of my pause was pretty brutal. So, by the way, there's 22 lands in this deck. Our last 4 hands were 1 land, 0 land, 5 lands, 1 land. So we're going through it. Obviously, this is not a keep. And then this is just so bad. It's so bad. But we have to keep it. And notably, our opponent's hand was obviously not that great in either game. They top decked or Morade exactly when they needed it, but otherwise our opponent has also had not great variance. This is, as I talked about, this is a really ugly match. This is not a match where oh, look at how powerful Badger Mole Cub is. Look at how powerful Manifold Mouse is. This is everything looks kind of ugly. But somebody has to win the game. One of us has to win game 3. Now, I'm going to put one of my uncastable cards on the bottom of my deck. Unfortunately, all of my cards are uncastable except Burst Lightning. But I'm closer to casting my 3 mana red cards than I am to my 1 mana white cards. So I decided to keep Seam Rip and go from there. The main reason I like Seam Rip a little better than Flowerfoot is because I'm on the draw and I expect it's going to be more important for me to be interactive. And my opponent goes Pollinator, and I draw another Seam Rip. Luckily, again, my opponent's hand is mostly air, but this is just brutal. I've drawn Village into Seam Rip. I can't cast. This is so bad. And the intimidation tactics, my flame color, I could concede right here. I don't. But, I'm getting I'm having like secondhand tilt or like memories of tilt. It's making me a little upset. But again, notably, our opponent also isn't doing that much. So they play intimidation tactics, and I'm like, oh my god, they have the nuts. But then they just attack for two and pass the turn. And it's like, oh, okay. And we draw Hard Claw, which is like not the worst thing in the world. We cast him, we give him haste. Okay. Like we didn't scoop. We took a second, we realized, okay, that was really good, but we're okay. Notably, Hired Claw is a mercenary. Does not die to shoot the sheriff. Technically, it's more accurate to tap the Rockface Village so that you can threaten spending red mana on like a Burst Lightning. But I decided not to waste time correcting the auto tapper because my hand is face up. So we draw another threat, which is nice. Our opponent, I think, is gonna So they were kind of showing us they had to shoot the sheriff. I think they read Hired Claw or something. But we still have to run out Emberheart. We gotta present a clock. We gotta try to kill our opponent before we get killed by a top deck, or a Boroid again. And here, I was too slow on the pause. Here I decide to put a counter on Hired Claw instead of killing one of the Gene Pollinators. My opponent has plenty of mana. I don't feel like I'm losing the race to my opponent's 1/2s. So I decided I would rather hold on to Iros. And my opponent plays Ouroboros, which means I get rewarded for holding on to Iros, because that means I can kill Ouroboros. Except, pause the video. Am I casting Iros? Nope, you can see I'm pausing. I'm doing math. The video's not paused. I'm just thinking, double checking my math because, oopsie, my opponent is dead. I put the Wicked Roll on Ouroboros, so now it has 3 power, and it puts 3 counters on everything, so it goes to 6. And Hired Claw, because of the counter that I put on him, is now at 5. And so again, these were really cool games because they were won on very thin margins. If I just fired off Iros and I was like, kill spell, I wouldn't have lethal here. I would be short on lethal because Hired Claw would have done 1 less damage on the prior turn, and it would be doing 1 less damage this turn. But making that decision to say, just because I can kill my opponent's thing doesn't mean I should, and realizing that, well, Iros is not getting a lot of value killing a 1/2. Let me continue to try and increase my clock and put a counter on Hired Claw. And it put me in a spot where my opponent was just dead. And it's a little bit funny because the Twisted Fealty was face up, but Twisted Fealty is not a popular card, and so my opponent didn't calculate for it. I'm assuming the Wicked Roll is what tripped them up. Vengeful Possession was pretty popular recently, and Vengeful Possession obviously doesn't put a Wicked Roll on anything. So, clearly my opponent overlooked the Wicked Roll, but Twisted Fealty is really hot tech on Ouroboros. You get to deal a lot of damage, especially because you can put the Wicked Roll on it so you make the Ouroboros bigger before he grows your team. So Yeah, we won both matches. Again, I didn't plan it. Um, I just decided to record two matches. And, I think there was a lot of ugly stuff, but as I said, I think ugly stuff is really valuable. You know, my opponent died to a card that they knew that I had in my hand. Really good reminder that when your opponent plays cards that you haven't seen before or you haven't played against very often, read them like twice. Really, really think. Um, Obviously, my opponent didn't have to lose this game. At least they didn't have to lose it right there. Um, yeah, reading the card explains the card. That's what we like say and we joke, but it's really good advice. People don't do it often enough. Um, I read cards all the time. I talked about this in a recent coaching session where new players they just play. There's several beginner to beginner intermediate players in our area, and never see them read my opponent's cards. Or they'll like read the card once when the opponent plays it and then never read it again. I read cards all the time. Like, it's right there. The information's free. It's there. Just read the card. It's okay. There's no like brownie points for remembering what cards do. Um, in any case, I hope you found this helpful. Maybe you learned a little something. Um, as I said, you know, my only goal here is to talk through some interesting decisions, show some interesting games, and I hope that you apply these things in your future games and maybe they help you win a few more. Uh, yeah, that's it. I'm tired, my throat hurts. I'm not built for this stuff. Um, but I'm incredibly thankful for all of you, and so, yeah, thanks a lot. Have a great day.